All right. Hello, everybody. So we're going to do today's class is on Black Moon Lilith and Persephone. And I'm going to talk a bit about some of the other goddess archetypes, basically these signatures that we can really observe, particularly in women. And so that's part of what the asteroids really represent, we can say, so the whole chart, right? We have the moon and we have Venus as far as the symbols or the planets that we're working with that are the feminine psyche. And then all of the other ones are either like a neutrality, like Mercury, or and Neptune has this god goddess quality. However, there's that Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. But I think we can all sort of understand and feel that Neptune is sort of beyond the this kind of essence of masculine, feminine, but just, the creator quality. So the asteroids are a way that we can put them in the charts and explore deeper the feminine psyche. So I got out one of my old, most favorite books, preparing for this class. I don't know if you ladies know this book, Goddesses in Every Woman. And she wrote one, Gods in Every Man. And her name is Jean Shinoda Bolin. And she is a psychologist. She's absolutely amazing writer, and she just touches such a depth in the psyche of the archetypes within our psyche. And I imagine she must have like really honed this skill with being a psychologist and like meeting with so many people. And she wrote these two amazing books, and I'm not sure if she has other books. But they're not astrological whatsoever, but they're absolutely beautiful. So this one is Powerful Archetypes in Women's Lives. And so this class today, we're going to go deeply into Lilith, Black Moon Lilith in the chart, as well as Persephone. And then, and I'm just going to bring up some of the other uh, asteroids that are commonly worked with, and we can just see the connection between these different sort of identities that women can really relate to or end up identifying with as a literal signature or soul pattern going on in our lives. And we're currently in the cycle where we just had the new moon almost 2 weeks ago, the solar eclipse new moon in Libra. So we had the sun is currently in Libra. So we had the sun conjunct the south node of the moon and Black Moon Lilith. And so we're in this time space where Lilith is quite pronounced, as Lilith has joined with the new moon, the sun and the moon, and then also the south node of the moon. So we may be feeling that and tuning into that energy. And I've written a lot about it and spoken about it already, but it basically has to do with that core rebellion that we can feel and the need to be respected in what we want to do and the freedom to be able to do what we want to do and live the way we want to live. So this is essentially what Lilith represents. And then Persephone, I'm going to bring her into this because they are so very different, and they, I look at them like sisters that are in this. There are similarities, and then there are these main differences. So where Lilith is the freedom, and Lilith will go, and Lilith will remove herself from partnership, and she will essentially live independently, even alone, for the sake of honoring her own freedom. And Persephone is very different because Persephone is bonded, essentially. Persephone is an archetype that carries the archetype of having been born into a signature of intimate bonding through the symbol of the mother. So we're going to go a little deeper into their individual stories, but Persephone is the mother's daughter, and Persephone is the wife. So she's what's considered a vulnerable goddess, or the vulnerable archetype in Psyche. And we can all relate to that. And some of us definitely are working with it more than, when we really feel that our relationships, or our relationship with our mother, or the relationship with the parents, or the relationships with the partners, become just so fundamental to our existence, and we allow them to have such an impact on our existence, because it's not even so much of allowing it, it just is our nature that so people who are all about relationship, essentially. And of course, we're all in relationship, need relationship, but there's a quality that we're talking about here. Like if someone is a Libra, if someone is Scorpio, then they are going to need relationship as a functioning quality of their own self-realization. And this is the Persephone signature, where she just is sort of tethered to the relationships that are going on in her life. So they have an enormous impact. So we can understand that if the relationships are negative, so is her world. And this is part of the evolutionary growth with Persephone, that there is the habit of attracting in the negative, attracting in the shadow, attracting in the pain and the suffering and the trauma. And that is the journey of Persephone. So we know people, we know women like this. We may be a woman like this who has come through, family situations where there is a lot of dysfunction, negative relationship dynamics, trauma in the mother or the father. So the person comes through, and it's sort of natural. It's just normal, or not natural, right? It's just normal that there is dysfunction in relationships that are meant to be safe or loving. And so the woman ends up, that's territory, that territory of dysfunctional, even toxic relationships, either with the parent. And then usually what happens is the person will recreate, attracting in people who need help, or who are just not well in some way, traumatized, or even narcissistic, and these kind of things, because it's normal. So Persephone has this powerful quality of, so let's get into the story of Persephone. As far as, Persephone was the maiden in the field, the daughter of Demeter, the mother. And Demeter, or Ceres, And all of these archetypes can be found like on astro.com. You can go down to the asteroid section. You can look up the name. It'll give you the number and you can put it into a chart. And a lot of astrologers work with Ceres and Athena and Juno, which Juno is Hera. Hera and Juno are the same. That is the wife. So Persephone is the daughter, right? So Demeter is the basically the earth mother as far as the myth behind it. So the mother of life, the mother of providing nurturing and sustenance to the world. And so at this point, everything is all wonderful, right? The mother and the daughter. But then, and not entirely wonderful, let's just bring that up, because the Juno or there's this connection with the wife already having some patriarchal trauma from the relationship with the husband. So that's already there. And that's the main story. It's a lot of the stories. We find that thread of the trauma, the dysfunction, the distortion in the patriarchy and what it has done to the feminine psyche, as well as, of course, the masculine psyche, because, it's happening to everybody. So that distortion, but as the story goes, it's just a normal, peaceful sort of reality until Pluto comes through cutting through the earth and basically abducting Persephone down into the underworld. So Persephone is just a maiden in the field, but she's also in that time of menstruation. So she's moving into womanhood, right? There's that cusp going on. And we all know, we really need to look at these stories and these signatures in the depth that they are representing the symbology that's there. So it's like she's awakening. It's a very Kundalini experience also, because Persephone is the wife of Pluto, is the underworld. It's the deep, transformational alchemical process. So we also see that in the Persephone woman, or in this signature, that these women are deep. They are deep in the psychic realms. They are deep in the emotional realms, and they can be deep in the psychoses of life, in the pathologies of life, because that is the nature of the underworld. Like, we do have to contend with the things that actually can drive us mad, can drive us into a level of insanity because of the depth of pain or distortion. Like, people do really wrong things and really hurt people. And then we have to live with it, right? And it's like, where does that go? How do we process things that are just beyond, so far from love? So it's that Persephone is actually like alchemizing the worst of the shadow, or the most devastating, or that which is so far from love. And it's the journey of, she ends up representing the queen of the underworld, the guide of the underworld, the one who can escort others through. But that is a journey earned, right? So there's a whole process of her getting to that place. And so in women who are identifying with this, or women who are just sort of, born into this sort of reality, there's these stages of growth that happen. And so I'm going to just mention some of the main stages. So the abduction into the underworld, the mother then goes into her own sort of sense of crazy. She goes into rage that her daughter has been stolen. The Zeus, the father, doesn't protect the daughter, knows about it, but doesn't do anything about it. So there we have these like masculine characters that are dominating the innocence, the feminine innocence, to just have what they want, to take what they want, or in the case of the father, to not protect. So, we know that the feminine naturally needs protection, right? There's like a natural essence of innocence and vulnerability. And then, of course, because we birth and we become pregnant, and then we have to like protect our child as we're feeding it, we too need protection. So there's this natural quality of the necessity for protection and to feel safe for the feminine to thrive. And so we can see that all got that was basically sacrificed and destroyed in that moment, that she was taken by, we could say, the shadow masculine, the unevolved masculine, this patriarchal, take what's mine, I'm going to have this. I'm going to assert my power, I'm going to dominate. And so the mother, Demeter, or Ceres, she stopped feeding the earth. She stopped the abundance, the growth. She refused to feed to provide anymore. And she went into her grief. So now we have this signature of a child who is living with a mother who is in her own trauma. And so beyond the reasons why, that can be a very powerful signature for the Persephone, a woman or archetype, that the Persephone type of woman can have a literal experience of the mother. And I have known all this very, very well. It's a super powerful symbol in my chart, which is why I've gotten so deeply into it. I have Persephone exactly conjunct my moon Neptune. So, and then when I started to learn about it, about 15 years ago, and magically it's this thing that it just like came, that it just like awoken in me. I think it might have been from this book, actually, The Goddesses, that I really started to even know about the Persephone archetype. But then realizing, because this signature of the mother wound is in the Persephone story, right? So, and there is this generations of the mother wound going on in my family, from one mother to the next, just like very difficult relationships and struggling to be in love with the children, and also struggling with their own pathologies, basically like the lunacy, like losing our minds, right? And that's another signature of the feminine, because we have our cycles. And so Persephone deeply connected to the underworld, deeply connected to like the lunar cycle. So that we get so engulfed in emotion. We get so deep in the depths of psyche. Like so many women know, like the day before our cycle starts or something, we can feel just like so emotional or crazy or angry, or just like a surge. And it can be shocking to ourselves. And I started to become aware of it. Like, whoa, it's actually passed now for a couple of years, but for a few years, I was like the day before my cycle, I'd get extremely tired. I could almost have to just sleep during that day. It would just hit me like a truck, right? And then I would get angry, like everything that was suppressed or repressed for that month would like come out on the day before my cycle. And then I would just be like, oh my God, I feel like a mad woman here. But it's like the reality, it's like truth, like we do. That's the whole thing of like a lunatic. Like we get a little crazy because we're like ruled by the moon. We're pulled all of our emotions, but also not just the emotions that come up. It's the unconscious that comes up, the subconscious. It's like the moon pulls from the underworld. And then we have to deal with it. It's like we are vehicles. And that is what Persephone is the signature for. She is the container. And it's really amazing because if you relate to that, like being the container, so that willingness to sacrifice yourself to the pain, to the trauma, to someone else's suffering, because you can transmute it, or at least you think you can. So it's that save, like, oh, I'm going to save this broken man, usually, or I'm going to save people from their pain, from their trauma, because I know it so well, because I live in the underworld, because because I've been around so many people. But it's the difference between, there's such a high level of awareness in the Persephone signature, where it's like it is the therapist, the psychologist, like the one who understands the psyche. So it's different than just being in the drama or in the trauma and not making sense of it or not understanding it. That's the difference with the Persephone woman. So the trauma with the mother, and then the trauma with the masculine, the shadow masculine, is the signature that can be repeating and repeating. And so what happened is that the mother refused growth, right? Refused to nurture life and sustain life anymore, unless her daughter was returned from the underworld. So there was a deal that was made that she could come up for like half the year, a portion of the year she could return back to the upper world, to the earth. And that was like, okay, that was a deal made. And then the mother was sort of better, okay, with the reality that had happened. And then the other aspect of it is the being abducted. The story goes that she was raped. So that whole quality of losing the innocence, being violated by the dominant masculine or dominant negative masculine. Um, and essentially another way, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the morality of the story. It's definitely it's symbolic, but that she was initiated into sexuality. So obviously through but that's the point of the story, that the rape really shows that through violation of innocence, which is, we always find this story in the Persephone, like being born into families where violation of innocence is already happening, like where the parents are drug addicts or checked out or alcoholics, like there is a violation of innocence going on. And that's part of the dynamic of the distortion. And so that's the journey of the Persephone woman, also dealing with the literal distortion of what is right and what is good. And how does one not sort of be completely taken out by that? Like, how do we rise from extreme trauma and pain and violations done to us? Because on the one hand, it would be that we don't. We just don't. We've lost so much and our potential is gone, and we may never be, happy or powerful or successful again because something so terrible happened. But that it's not the case. We can rise. So how? It's because we have the capacity, the ability, or we can find it, we can harness it to tap a level of wisdom and power that is ours. And that is the journey of Persephone, that the journey of, even within the darkest, even within the most distortion, the ability to rise and to become the queen, to become the guide. But again, remembering that it's not just so like, oh, you're the queen now. It's like such an earned position that you actually did rise from the adversity and sort of live to tell the story, and then live to be able to guide others through it. So Persephone was offered the pomegranate from Hades, Pluto, under the terms of, if you eat the seeds, you'll have to stay here. And if you don't, you can leave. and she chose to eat the seeds. So this again represents part of the dark feminine psyche, and not like the negative dark feminine, but like how deep women are, how deep we go, how that we do, there's this it's now memed at this point, but there is this funny meme out there about like, I want it all. Like, it's so true. Like, women want it all. It's like we want more and more and more and more, and we want to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper for the most part, right? Some of us are avoiding that and that whole thing too, but it's just we hold the mystery. We hold the mystery in a different way than the masculine. It's like, it's said that the masculine is like up here and in the higher realms seeking spirituality, and the women are the depth. The depth. Like we seek the mystery literally from the womb space, from within. And so it's that representation also. So that desire to choose, the choosing of the pomegranate, the forbidden fruit, the fruit of pleasure, the aphrodisiac, represents that wanting of it. I do want the mystery. I actually do want to stay here. Like, this is interesting to me. This dark underworld is like, and then we have to remember that it was always her destiny too. So the Persephone, this maiden, this sweet innocent, was always destined to become the queen of the underworld. So that also is part of the story, that this queen, dark energy, also holds this really beautiful innocence, the young maiden in the field of flowers, right? It's all like simple and beautiful. And so, and the pomegranate is also representing that Kundalini sexual energy, the transmutation of consciousness and awakening of awareness through sexual union, through the merging of souls, the feminine, the masculine, this whole thing. So that can also be a very powerful path for the Persephone signature, into the dark realms, but also into the depth of union through sexuality, that whole powerful alchemical experience. And then it can be that giving themselves to others in that way, like knowing that it is such a deep place to go, that alchemy in soul and mind and being will occur through that avenue. And so it's about consciousness. Like, there's these levels of consciousness that are awakened, that the Persephone woman is aware of. And so choosing to stay in, she also lied to her mother that she was made to eat the pomegranate, but she was not forced to eat it. She had a choice. So she lied to her mother, and this is a really powerful part of the story. It represents the core, the Kore, the child that wants to remain the child. So the fact that she didn't stand up for her own power, take responsibility, like, yeah, I ate it. I want to stay here. I'm good with this. Um, she wanted to stay innocent in the eyes of her mother. So that's really interesting too, because where it's different than like Lilith, she chose to hide. She chose to not embody herself. She chose to not like become sort of the persona, or to just have no persona. And that can be a really strong quality of the Persephone woman too, to not have a persona, to not have an identity, to even get invisible, because there's different reasons. I've seen it in different ways, but it can be that because they are so extremely overwhelmed by the trauma that they are dealing with within themselves and with the people in their life, that it's just difficult to be social. And to, it's kind of like that experience of like, it's very difficult to just go in the world when no one knows what I'm carrying or what I'm dealing with every day in my own self, or with these relationships in my life that is so painful. And I can't just talk about it or express it. It's too deep. It's too dark. The stories that are playing out, what these people are doing is so excruciating. So it can be that that going deeper and deeper into the depths, into the underworld. And so this is a big part of the signature of, even though they can be so powerful in their psychic qualities, their way of being able to transmute pain and expose themselves to pain and still be able to sort of rise, and also understand what's going on with people and why they're doing things, they can still not want to take responsibility for life. So they can stay in a victim role. They can keep themselves as victims because the evidence is everywhere around them that they are the victim of what is going on. And so this one, the lying to the mother, the not wanting to truly own who they are and the choices they make, almost like maybe embarrassed or ashamed of their depth or of even their power. And then also the journey of trusting themselves, that they can actually become responsible enough. So we see this in the Persephone woman, that struggle of actually wanting to become like the woman. They can want to stay like the girl for a long time. So they can like looking for someone to, be stronger than them, help them out, get them out of the position they're in. And yet what they usually end up doing is maybe attracting in powerful people, but powerful people who are like Hades, who are going to manipulate, who are still going to dominate and suppress and repress them. So the rise or the growth doesn't ever come until they learn how to nurture themselves, how to support themselves, and how to love themselves, and how to value themselves. So this is also the signature of the moon, the wounded mother, that they usually were not taught how to nurture themselves from the mother. They usually had difficult relationships with the mother, or a mother who was in a lot of suffering herself. So they are moving through that, not having been nurtured or taught how to mother, how to parent, how to be responsible. They have to find that place in themselves that eventually they stop giving themselves away to the pain of everybody else. They say like no more. And instead of always getting their like psychic powers and intuitive powers and their powers of the, being able to psychologically understand people, those natural gifts that they usually have, instead of having them activated constantly through the negative and through the trauma, they realize how to, turn them into their gifts, that they can use them in ways where they're not being destroyed, they're not being taken down, they're not being used, because that's the other thing too, being used as the container. And this can happen through their parents too. Like the parents just violate their innocence and use the children, do things in front of the children that children shouldn't be exposed to, or tell them things that they're too young to hear, or just, that sacrificing the innocence. So it's about that reclaiming their own, learning how to nurture themselves, take care of themselves. And essentially in that, they become mature. They become that they are now responsible and can sort of evolve into the woman from the girl that was victimized and traumatized, and yet had all this ability and power, but could never rise with it because continuously stayed under all of the trauma, or being used by others in a way that being the vehicle, or the container for other people. other people's stuff. So you can see how there's the journey of learning a lot of boundaries. You know, the underworld is this sort of place where there's not a lot of boundaries going on and there's a lot of invasion. And so how does one, and then there's the archetype also of Hecate or Hecate, I always call her, but she's like the sister, best friend who came to help Persephone in the underworld, to help her like sort of navigate. So there's that interesting aspect of, you know, sort of finding another or finding others that are similar. The Persephone quality will find others and like sort of help each other through that. So let me see if I have forgotten anything. Do either of you have any questions thus far about the Persephone?
I had a question. So, if someone has Persephone on their north node, I know that there's, a lot of other things happening in the chart, but I just wonder, this person is Pluto in the fourth house, and yeah, it's Persephone on their north node in the second house. Yeah, I just think about Pluto fourth house experiences and the kind of feminine energy there, and just wonder if you have an idea of like, yeah, what
Yeah,
it
is
means.
this a male or female?
A male.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little different, right? Because like we're talking about literal archetypes of the feminine psyche. So, um, for a man to have Persephone really pronounced like that on the North Node, also a Pluto in the fourth house, the house of the moon, um, that is showing definitely like this orientation towards the underworld depths of the feminine, you know, that sort of inclination to, you know, this person could be psychic. It could be like a man who is a psychic. I mean, I think I know who you're talking about, but these are just some of the, um, as examples of how that could play out. Like, it just is coming to my mind, like there are a lot of men out there who are psychics and working that field, right? That would be a very like Persephone on the North Node, Pluto in the fourth house kind of thing for a man. But basically someone who is in this consciousness of like working the depths of psyche as a state of being, you know, transmuting emotion. And Persephone is always going to be an indicator of major trauma.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, the pain body just so activated through essentially like the violation of innocence. And it's not always intentional, right? Like, you know, with my story, um, nobody was essentially intentionally abusing each other. It was just there was so much alcohol and drugs going on that there was the behaviors and the experiences that were playing out were so painful. So uh it can be that literal abusive horrendous things happening, like real violations, and then unintentional, I guess we could call them too, just like being born. And with that kind of signature with him, Pluto in the fourth house, it's likely being born into a family that is, you know, really struggling with trauma. So already coming through, like, I'm not safe, I'm not secure, I'm not supported. And, you know, my emotional safety is challenged here. And that's his journey through his life to find his own emotional safety and essentially his emotional intelligence. And it is, I would say with Lilith or Persephone on the North Node, the more and more he was to sort of go towards that, you know, maybe as a profession. Um, because it's in the second house, so it does have to do with his value system, his resources. So he has some kind of depth in the emotional realms and understanding. So the more, you know, it just seems like he's going to be in the depth of Psyche, the underworld, the fact that the pain body and the trauma is activated, and so he might just find himself around those kind of people, or that,
Yeah,
no matter
that's
what. So
yeah,
the more
that's
he
huge.
harnesses, like, instead of sort of trying to save all the wounded that are just going to suck him into a vacuum and sort of, because that is the big struggle with Persephone, that they literally are the transmuters, and like it, it's like they can take it. They can take the gross insanity. They've experienced it in their own families, in their relationships. Maybe they've
I thought maybe it was my internet, but I think it might be Jessica's because you're not frozen to me, Otasia.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Hopefully she'll get unfrozen.
Yeah. Every time
fractured nature
yeah.
going on
Sorry,
around him.
Jessica, you froze for a couple
Oh,
seconds,
okay.
maybe 3 or
Just
4
I was
seconds.
talking about the when you have a parent that is emotionally or mentally unstable, and then you're just constantly in this sort of fractured reality, and that can be so disturbing. And I went through that on so many occasions, and where it was like too much sometimes, like the level of insanity here is like, I don't know how to deal with this and live my life in a normal way. Like, this is so not normal, that kind of thing. It's just so not normal. How do I even process this and like show up to this and respond to this? Um, so that fine line of being able actually to transmute it and process it. But also just be careful what you expose yourself to. That's sort of like what the message is for him and anyone who has the Persephone signature. And I think it comes down to that. It becomes a journey. I obviously learned that over time. Like, I started to see like, oh, I just keep making myself available for this. Like, that's literally a choice that I didn't know I had for the longest time. It was just my reality. It's like, oh, here it is again, here it is again. And then I realized, like, I literally have a choice to not allow all this in. And then life changes, because then you're beginning to harness power and you're beginning to honor your own basically boundaries. Because the story of Persephone, her boundaries were violated entirely. She was made the wife. She was made to be an identity that she had not chosen. So that's the other thing too, that the Persephone can do. They can live, they can be taken by life. It's abduction is the archetype. So when we look in a birth chart, this is what we see. When you look at the birth chart, you can see in anyone's chart. And, these are subtle, the more subtle archetypes of Psyche. So if it's pronounced, then you really want to look at it. If it's not so pronounced in a chart, then you don't necessarily need to give it a lot of energy, but it can still be interpreted. And this is the way that you interpret the Persephone in the chart. It can be, if someone has it very pronounced, you want to really recognize that this person has like these psychic, psychological, emotional gifts, essentially. And they either are in the power of them or they're overwhelmed by them, depending where they are. But the Persephone itself is living in the underworld of the depths of psyche and emotion. And so therefore it is very much there. And in the chart, we interpret it where the person is is likely to get abducted, to give themselves away to the depths of it or the shadow of it. And so this can be either in power or without power, without one's own empowerment, just getting swept up by life and just being like, I'm a victim, I get victimized, or I don't have the power, I'm not I'm still a child. I'm not strong enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm not the parent. I have no control over this. I can't do it. So getting abducted into, or the evolved aspect of it is that they know their power, they know what they can handle, and they know that they are handling the deep stuff with themselves and with people, and they know that they're going to rise, right? It's this queen archetype. So
I needed to hear
that
that piece so much today because of what this person's been going through, and I was kind of reaching my own limit of feeling like I can tolerate it. Like, okay, why do we keep diving into like the darkest of someone's shadow? Like, what's going on? Can we just like let people be people and just like not go that deep with them? Like, why do we have to touch on like the most darkest part of this person's psyche and like keep on going there and like try to transmute it, and then going to the place where realizing where you need to have a boundary with it, and that kind of cycle is what I'm seeing, and his complete confidence that he can hold that and be a container for that and not have it spoil him or affect him. It's just like, it's inspiring, but it's also just like a little bit hard to journey alongside with. So yeah, but when you said the boundaries, it was a really yeah, really powerful just kind of theme word to focus on with that.
That's the thing, high level of responsibility, it cannot be shirked. And that is the biggest lesson of the Persephone. Like, I have lived it through so much, like this feeling of not, like, it's too hard. Because that's the life always. Like, it literally is like, oh, it's too hard with this person and that person. And when I'm holding it, it's just like, this is too much. But when you can look at it different, like, yeah, this is the most intense, but like, I got this, like, I got the skills, like, but that's like a paradigm shift, right? That's like a definite place in the person's psyche that I remember like reaching eventually of like, oh, right, I I do have this. Like, I am the survivor. I am the one who is rising, and I don't have to keep identifying with the victim. That's essentially it. But that's a place that a lot of people go through to like accept that, no, you're not the victim. Like, shit happens, but like, you're super powerful and that kind of thing. And so for him, yeah, I was just saying that like responsibility is the ultimate. He needs to like really stay with that I have responsibility for the fact that I will expose myself to, that's the thing. It's not just like, oh, I'll expose myself to pain and I'll expose myself to people's trauma. That what needs to be recognized is I will expose myself to things that literally can drive a person crazy. Like, it's too devastating to, certain things are too much to take on, or certain things that happen to us are like too much. So if you're going to do that and know that that's what you're doing, like going into the underworld and leading yourself into these places, then you have to lead with responsibility. You can't be all like, I'm a victim, or yeah, I'll sacrifice myself for you. Like, you just can't. You have to go in it like with boundaries, with like a high level of maturity and like that parent responsibility kind of thing. So yeah, so in the chart, it's where we well, I'll bring up the charts and then we'll go a little more deeper so we can use the visual example for that. Let's move to Lilith now. And then Otasia, but did you have a question before I move on about Persephone?
No, I'm just curious to see it kind of like how that underworld comes through depending on the house and the planets around it. And I'm sure we'll see that when we look at the charts. So
Yeah, okay. And I also have on my website and in the community a write-up on Lilith through the signs and houses. So that's just like a little, through each one that can be like a guide. So we can now see why I wanted to talk about Persephone, because there is such contrast with Lilith. So Lilith now is so very different. There is this quality of where Persephone needs to claim her identity. You know, the lying to the mother about her actual choices represents this willingness to not have an identity. That's the other thing too with the Persephone on the North Node. It can be that one does not want to assume an identity. They don't want to become something. They don't want to become the guide, the leader, the responsible one, like the one who guides the broken souls through the underworld, the scared and unknowing through the underworld. Like that is such a high level of responsibility, and it is only, you know, the one or for the few, right? That can do that. And so that is part of it that needs to, the shadow is that they cannot want to claim an identity. They cannot want to claim responsibility for a position of purpose and role in life. They can want to stay in the underworld, which is an extremely overwhelming place, right? I'm sure you know from being with him, also with Pluto in the 4th house, it can be all consuming. The emotions, the feelings, the depth it can just be 24 hours a day. So if that's the reality, because I can relate to that, that is I have Pluto in the 4th house too, as you know. And it is like my entire reality can just be the emotional, psychic, deep realms 24/7. And so I've learned over time that like, oh, I need to like make the best out of this. Obviously, astrology has been the main tool for me to like, astrology feeds that, but in a very positive way. And so that, you know, yeah, that losing a sense of self and not wanting to claim the self, because when we don't claim ourself, when we don't claim that we are responsible, that we can take leadership in life, we remain the child. We remain less responsible, less taking on responsibility to actually be the leader and to be the provider. And so in his case, it is the leader and provider of, you know, this sort of territory. But there can also be that still wanting to stay in the shadows, stay sort of younger, and always sort of also looking for the guide, looking for the one that is sort of more powerful, more responsible, that you can look up to. And that's a stage, but at some point you need to become the guide yourself. So with Lilith, Lilith is very different. Lilith already, so the story of Lilith is the first wife of Adam prior to Eve. And so Lilith was created out of the same dust of Adam, right? That of the earth, of the sediment of the earth came Adam and Lilith. And then after Lilith chose to leave the garden, Eve was created out of the rib of Adam. So there we have, again, this very patriarchal story of the feminine being, you know, of the man, coming out of him, like him first, then her. But the story of Lilith is that the man and the male and the female were created of the earth together at the same time in this beautiful Garden of Eden, and had everything they needed. And as the story goes, Adam wanted her to be less than him, essentially to lie beneath him, is how the story goes, and to basically to submit. And then Eve was created in the likeness of submission. The submissive feminine who is less than, made from the body of man. And obviously that story has served, you know, a purpose and agenda that has perpetuated for a very long, thousands of years around. I mean, there are still entire countries that believe that women are less than men, men who believe that women are less than men. So Lilith chose to leave the garden, basically with a like, fuck this, I'm not doing that. That doesn't feel right to me. I don't want that. I don't even need this. Like whatever's out there, that's where I'm going now. And so this is just all powerful in the symbolism of Lilith, that being asked, being made to be less than who you are, less than what you want, to comply, and to choose to basically alienate, isolate, or ostracize yourself for the sake of your own truth, for the sake of your own honor, for the sake of your own soul essence. So that is a signature that can be very, very strong in Lilith. And so we can see that it is like a Uranus Aquarian signature. I also feel there's a lot in the Lilith signature that is similar to the Chiron archetype, that wounded healer, who is Chiron has the signature also of being, but Chiron is a masculine archetype, but has that signature of being alienated and ostracized and outcasted, because of the suffering and because of the deformity of the suffering. So that's a really powerful thing that we see all around us. We tend to suffer, and we tend to feel handicapped and even deformed by our suffering or our weaknesses. Like we can literally feel deformed by what we lack or what we can't do. And it makes us feel awkward. And so Chiron has this hunchback of Notre Dame kind of thing, like just a little awkward, maybe even unusual to look at. You know, they can have like features and stuff that are a little different or awkward. It's just this quality. And so Lilith is carrying that sort of something about her, or the signature, the Lilith woman, that is what it ends up playing out into is that it is rejected. So this rejection of who she was. And then what happened with the whole story is that Lilith went off and found caves to live in, and was just she's depicted as being highly capable and resourceful and independent and being a true survivor. But that she made the wrong choice, that in choosing herself, she became gross and ugly and distorted. And we can kind of see that. I mean, we could totally see that in the world. Like, even if you just want to be an artist or a musician, it's like, so, like it's dissed, it's frowned upon often, right? Not by everybody, but, and so her story goes into so much distortion. She even became demonized, like the baby killer. Some of the stories say that she would eat babies. And so that just shows that, like, the nurturing part of her, like not nurturing, not motherly, not tender, not feminine. So, but this is just what was placed upon her too. And what the thing is, the story is, we can become that. So we can become what is placed upon us, right? So that whole thing of, oh, if you're going to choose not to submit and be submissive, and you're going to just walk out, then you're going to become ugly, and you're going to become less feminine, and you're going to become less nurturing, and you must be. So this can also be in the signature of women who choose not to have children, and like that sort of negative that can be projected onto them. Like, you're not nurturing enough, like you just don't know, whatever. Not maternal. And so there's that. And Lilith was really a powerful signature as far as like literally in cultures, a lot of pagan cultures, and there was like amulets made people would wear to protect themselves in childbirth and from all kinds of things. And so that demonization of the feminine, she really upholds that and has taken the weight of that. And that the whole experience around if a woman wants to be successful or wants to be powerful or a leader in any way, that it's less feminine, essentially. And so Lilith can really have this, and part of why these amulets towards, safe childbirth were made in her name were because of this projection around, if you don't submit, if you're not this type of woman, then, well, essentially, you're not safe. We should fear you. That's the other part of Lilith that she holds, like the literal that we are feared. The power of women is feared. The creativity of women is feared. The intelligence, the capability, the capacity, right? The Eve story has made us to be less than in so many ways, right? It has been perpetuated through cultures that it's even been said that women don't need to orgasm, right? Like there are beliefs out there like that, like we just don't need that, and we're not smart, and we're definitely physically inferior, and all of these things. So Lilith she is that the counter aspect of this. And let's bring up some charts. So any questions at this point about Lilith? So here, I made these. So in the birth chart, it represents where we may have been rejected, exiled, or repressed, and how we may in turn deny ourselves or rise against it. I'll put these images up in the school also, so you can have them and read them. And then we have Persephone, guide and bride of the underworld, seer of depths, mother's daughter, wife, priestess, psychic, midwife of soul. Vulnerable goddess, she always belongs to someone, giving the life force of transformation to their story. She offers herself as a vessel for the alchemy to take place through. She sacrifices for the cause of becoming. She is the container and the midwife for deep metamorphic soul renewal. And she carries the oppression of the feminine and the burden of suffering and psychoses that is born of this. She transmutes it all and expresses the sanctity of soul. So this is part of the journey. With Black Moon Lilith, evolutionary growth arc moves consciousness from social and self-rejection into proclaiming one's true self, and then the liberation into being a living expression of that potential, the rebellion of oppression into sovereignty of expression. So, can you see these charts? No. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. So, here we have chart 1 and chart 2 here. So, what that was just talking about, let's start with Lilith. So here in this chart, we have Black Moon Lilith conjunct Chiron in Gemini in the 12th house. And in this chart, we have Black Moon Lilith conjunct the North Node in Taurus and the 8th house. So reading the archetype of Lilith in the chart, firstly, you want to see if it's really powerfully placed. And in these charts, I would say absolutely, especially the Lilith on the North Node. Very prominent, right? Anything on the North Node is definitely pulling us into the actualization of realizing and resolving that signature in the psyche of that person. And Lilith with Chiron is really interesting because I talked about the Chiron connection that Chiron and Lilith share, that being ostracized, being alienated, being outcasted because of something unique about you and something threatening in some way to society. So that's what we're looking at here, right? Lilith is also expressing the rebellion of the conformity, what is normal in society, what most people are sort of subscribing to. Lilith does not. And she's fighting for the fact that we are different, that she gets to be who she is, regardless of how many people don't agree with it. So it's absolute, sovereignty and unique independence that Lilith is all about. So, and the arc of growth that I was speaking about has to do with that, because it can be something that society itself, our relationships itself, our family and parents may have rejected in us, that we learned that this thing isn't accepted, it's not wanted, and there's sort of danger, like Lilith was demonized because of her choice to leave, because of her choice of what she wanted and didn't want. So we can also, it can lead to that, where it's that intense that we actually get sort of made wrong by this quality. And then so the journey is, how does one deal with that? And at some point, so what can happen is that we accept that as truth, that yes, this part of me is wrong. And so I also need to reject it. And I also need to repress it. And I either need to make that go away, make that go into the caves, or I need to make myself go away. And then the next stage is no, I can't live like this. I can't live in the rejection, the repression, the oppression that is being asked of me, required about me, in order for me to stay safe in the Garden of Eden. I have to repress myself and reject myself. So they can tend to live in environments that maybe aren't so safe. That can be a part of the signature that we see, that they are literally born. And I have Lilith on my South Node. So I had that as well, that, the not safe environment. And the not being also another part of it. There can be the rejection, but there can also be that people can't even recognize who you truly are. Like you're just surrounded by people who don't see your uniqueness. They're just not capable of seeing it because they're just so far from it, or whatever their trip is. So when we look at this chart here, and then so obviously continuing that stage, it's the reclamation of no, I can't deny myself. Even if I am denied, I will, and even though that is not safe, because leaving the garden essentially is not safe until you figure out how to be safe out there, that it's worth it, then I need to do it. And I will. And then so it's the reclamation of the true self And then it's the representation of it, that I will represent this part of me, that actually you're wrong, that the way that you think that this isn't right, or this is, whatever, it's not the truth. It may be the truth for you, but it's just not the truth. And so, and Lilith with the Chiron could definitely be that the pain, really connected to the pain, that that sort of suffering that Chiron represents, that pain body that Chiron represents, is walking that journey with Lilith. So it becomes a part of what is not okay about you, that is potentially maybe rejected, or maybe you reject it, that you have pain, that you have suffered, that it's maybe too much for some people to take on. And I know your story, and it does make sense. It's almost like, do you tell people or do you not tell people? Because like maybe an instant story or an instant judgment is always going to be sort of projected onto you, right? From whatever they perceive the tragedy to mean. And it can be very different from what it means to you, but it can also be that you've been sorting through what does it mean to you because of all the projection of what this pain story actually means to you. And it's interesting because it's in Gemini, which does have to do with opinions, perspective, beliefs, what you believe and what other people believe, what what is the truth? What is the knowledge? Because there's something in you too. Beyond that pain, it's like you have knowledge that potentially may be hidden. I know we've talked about this before, but that 12th house Gemini and the Gemini rising, it's like this truth, this knowledge that you have is like rising into consciousness. And with these Sagittarius symbols, it can be like a projection, projecting the wisdom onto other people, or, seeing it in others, the 7th house, but not necessarily in you, although it is in you. But it's similar to like the Persephone story, where depth of wisdom is cultivated over time. And so we may not even know we have it for the longest time. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wow, I gained a lot from that experience that I didn't even know. It just sort of hit me. And now, now I'm in it. So there is that. So that 12th house, that Gemini, Chiron, really, definitely a really powerful signature. Do you have any questions about, or anything coming up for you with this particular example?
No, I mean, it really resonates. And yeah, it's helpful to just understand the relationship between those two, and then with the Gemini piece as well. And yeah, it's cool to kind of see how that evolution has kind of unfolded in my life, and kind of where I am now with it, and yeah, how it will continue to unfold. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And, you have a square here too, right? 'Cause Saturn and Jupiter are naturally squared, opposing Chiron with Lilith. So Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, is such a part of this, that, opposite Saturn, what we talked about is that depression too, that can come in around, the bigger picture, and Sagittarius and everything. And so, and there's Jupiter. So that going from like expansion and, the opposite of depression, just like living life large. And then, so you have that dynamic that goes on, that something can pull you down. And then there's an aspect of you that's always sort of elevating too. And Lilith is a part of that. So yeah, I think that being in the field of psychology and therapy is perfect for your chart, to just like being able to navigate these realms with more consciousness, the pain body realms. So now we have the example of Lilith and the North Node here. In Taurus in the 8th house. So this natural axis of Taurus Scorpio really activated, because Lilith on the north node is Lilith opposing the south node. So sometimes that can be a little complicated to understand, but let's look at that for a minute. So when something is opposite the south node, we want to consider it as in oppositions are always an external force, right? The main, the base point, in this case, the south node, which is the deep inner self, what is already so deeply ingrained within her as far as the patterns, Lilith is opposing that. So it can be that she has in her psyche, or she has had times of experience where the Lilith was in opposition, a trigger to who she was, maybe the stability that she was, how she knew herself. Maybe there is like other people that come around that are very Lilith, that, oppositions are like, oh, I see you, like I'm here and I see you. And it's that journey of realizing that like she is what she's seeing. Right. But the opposition represents like it's a polarized, it's the Aries Libra, right? So the Libra is like, oh, I see you, you're the other. And now you're going to reflect back to me who I am from your perspective. And so it's this quality, the Libra Aries quality of we get reflection from people and we can accept it. We can be like, oh, wow, I never saw myself that way. That's true. Like, thank you. Now I see more. Or we can reject it. Like, it is just not true. But either way, we're in this experience of realizing how we affect people, how they affect us, and so on. And so this oppositions create that. I'm bringing up the Libra Aries example because it represents the natural zodiac of where the new moon and the full moon experience. So the new moon being that Aries, like birth of new potential and power, and the full moon, Libra, and the natural zodiac being the first stage into a socialized reflection. So oppositions in a chart are always pulling that dynamic of a new full, an opposition of like, this is the inner self in reflection to the external. And so in this case, the inner self is the south node in Scorpio in the second house, like the the depth of her being, the exposure to Scorpio, a lot of deep, powerful people and experiences in her life that is deeply affecting and rooted in her entire value system and her self-esteem and self-image and her resources. It's a very sort of entangled, entwined with the other Scorpio experience that she's moving through, as not only just like realizing who she is separate from other people, but realizing that through other people, she actually does realize herself. There is that alchemy that's always happening as she continues to like go into the sort of the cauldron of relationship. She does find herself, but that's what Scorpio represents, that fine line of, am I losing myself or am I finding myself when I'm so deeply entwined with others or with whatever it is that we get into. And so there we have that. And Lilith is opposing. So it's like an antagonistic energy that is potentially aggravating her sense of self, aggravating her stability and her values, while at the same time calling you to become more and more Lilith, more and more Lilith in Taurus in the 8th house. So when you are with other people, the 8th house, when you are involved in these deep, intimate relationship experiences that you're having, that you are in your truth, that you're standing in who you are, who your identity is, standing for yourself, which is in this case in in a Taurian way, in this way of like, I am centered, I know myself, I am like the qualities of being peaceful and sensual and nurturing and homey, like all of these things that Taurus are. And basically, Lilith is like 100% okay with what is and who they are. So it's like really being, it ends up being like the Lilith, you advocate for that. Because that's the thing about Lilith too. She ends up, she's the rebel. So it's like, it's almost like we can see like the picket signs, you know, like she will stand for it. She will fight for this thing, whether it's being like loud and obnoxious or being, you know, like a tomboy or just like whatever the things are that people will like criticize and just being like, no, this thing is awesome. Like, it's amazing to be like a loud, obnoxious woman. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm going to be. And, you know, yeah. So that here, Lilith on the North Node, really needing to come into the fact that you stand for something that you're really going to represent and that it's right, even if it's wrong. And again, it's the like sort of moving on, knowing when to move on, knowing when to leave, knowing when to, you know, like then we don't need to deal with these people that are going to give us all kinds of conflict, because it's actually not about changing anyone's mind. We can see that in the story. It's been it's been an idea perpetuated for thousands of years. So it really shows that in the story that it's not about changing anyone's mind. It actually shows that we can't change anyone's mind. The belief was that women must be less than. Women must submit by the order of the man. And if they don't, then, you know, all kinds of things are going to become of them. And so really be having that willingness, to separate yourself. That is the other thing with Lilith, that Persephone is different. Lilith will separate herself from relationship, from people, from the story, from just like, no, because it's like, no, I know who I am. I know what my unique, I know what I want. I know what I don't want. And that is what I'm going to stand for. So yeah, this is, I would say also in Taurus, because we know Taurus is, they cannot be convinced of anything. They have conviction about what they want and what they don't want, what's comfortable, what's not comfortable. They are the ones who will just, they literally are about isolation. They're just like, it's not comfortable for me, so I'm just not going there. I'm not doing that. I'm not eating that. I'm not listening to that. I'm not looking at that. I'm not wearing that. It's just, there's just so much conviction around what is right for them and what is not right for them. And that's the thing with Taurus, they can get really limited. So even if, you know, their worlds can get small because they can just be like, I got these 10 things and that's like all I need in life. And then Scorpio's like, wait, someone's going to come around and totally challenge all this comfort that you have, because there's so much more there's just so much more happening, right? So, but with the North Node in Taurus, oh yeah, what I was getting to is that it's just, it is really about standing up for yourself, because that's what Taurus does. That I like this because I like it. I don't like this, and I don't really want to be swayed. I don't want to be convinced. And yeah, the word's not coming to me. It's another word that means convinced. But yes. So any questions about this signature?
Yeah, I guess no questions right now, but I just was laughing a lot because so much of it was just resonating for me on so many levels. I was standing up for myself is definitely a huge theme in my life. I'm still learning a lot about and how to fully embody that. And I'm finding myself surrounded by so many people with strong Taurus to kind of teach me that and show me that yeah, that
Mm.
fixed sense of self. And yeah, I liked when you said the word conviction, because the times in my life when I was really allowing myself to be persuaded or convinced, um yeah, I was really, I guess, conditioned in that Persephone, um or Eve is a better, yeah, way of being. And so anyway, yeah, I just appreciated that. The words that stood out to me was standing up for myself and a sense of conviction. So
Okay, so let's quickly look at Persephone. So, Otasia, you have Persephone exactly opposite your sun. So it is powerful. That's a powerful placement. Anything, opposite the sun. And so with Persephone, we ask, where are we susceptible to being abducted into the underworld, into the suffering, into the victimization? And where do we need to learn to really mature and grow up, take responsibility, and essentially harness our gifts that are naturally there? So Persephone, powerfully placed opposite the sun, would imply that you have these qualities quite pronounced, like being in the depths, having psychic, emotional, empathic abilities, being able to hold space, being able to, hold a lot of pain and still handle it, still manage, still. And then also the potential experience of pathology or neuroses, having experienced it yourself, or, like checking out into breakdowns or not being able to handle all that you have to process. And so in Libra, Aries, right? This definitely, so let's look at Persephone in the 5th house in Libra. Well, first I want to say opposite the sun, we can see again, like we were talking about the opposition here. It's like your sun in Aries is here and Persephone stands opposite. So it can be, again, like a projection that you project that Persephone out, that other people are more, in those like psychic dark realms and not quite you, or other people have more power there or more whatever it is, right? It could be that, when actually you are these two sides of the same, that you can be in this solar power, masculine, energetic, and you can also be in this deep feminine space. And when we talk about this deep feminine space, it does have to do with that the vulnerability, the deep vulnerability, because there's one thing, like we can be powerful and all, it's like the energy of birth, right? It's like a woman birthing is so extremely powerful, but at the most vulnerable. It's, and she's holding that. She's like in so much fear, in so much pain, in so much of the unknown. Like when we really look at it, it's just crazy what is going on, that the woman is actually experiencing and processing and alchemizing this huge death and rebirth process that, then the baby comes out and the woman is all of a sudden like a different identity, like a mother, and has all this other components just all happening and falling into place. And it's really intense. And so, yes, this is powerful within you. And so this has to do with the projecting out of yourself. So you would want to look at it from that lens, like where are you not fully sort of claiming that you are, in fact, quite deep and quite powerful, and all of the things that Persephone represents. And we want to consider too, there's a desire. Persephone carries desire. She carries the desire of the depth. She carries desire of deep union, which we didn't talk entirely about with Persephone, but that some of the highest levels of the Persephone Hades union is that sacred sexuality, the really going into, because it's not even like written or spoken about, but we have to know that from out of the immature masculine, where that represents a masculine who's not mature in his own sexuality, the beginning of their relationship. But as she becomes the queen, she's obviously going to be requiring and essentially demanding an entirely different type of relationship for her own beingness. So he also is going to rise to meet her. And in that, they become this pure example, basically, of like tantric union, like true soul, emotional, spiritual alchemy within that deepest space. So I find this really interesting because this is also symbols, Aries, Libra, masculine, feminine. The sun is a very masculine. Persephone is ultra feminine. So there is something that we have spoken about before, this masculine feminine quality that you're working with pretty strong. And so the fifth house can be, where do we get abducted? Where do we get pulled down and become victimized? So on the highest level, it can be getting, giving yourself away to the creative process, which is the highest expression, like when in your power, like really like you will give yourself into the flow of creatively actualizing yourself, of becoming the self-becoming, which fifth house Leo represents, that the absolute need that you have to become who you are meant to become in this life, to realize all your creative potential, fifth house. So on the shadow of that, it can be too busy in being a victim, too busy in immaturity, because it takes responsibility to be brave enough. Leo is courage, right? It's the lion. So to be a Leo, to get up on stage, to do anything creative, it takes courage and it takes willpower. Like it's only us who creates the thing. So it's like we can't depend on anybody. And that's part of why the Leo wants recognition. Like I just did all this. Can someone, hug me, give me some, like, acknowledge what's been going on here. That's a very, and it's so normal and deserved, right? It's just like the natural flow. So there's that, and that could be part of it, that not having anyone around who's acknowledging, appreciating, recognizing, like how amazing you are, what you're creating, what you're doing, what you're expressing. So it could be that could be the victimization, getting pulled into that level. And in Libra, getting abducted or giving yourself away to other people's perspective, to other people's judgments, which keep you victimized, which also keep you out of your power. And again, it's that journey of the Persephone. We need to stand up and take responsibility. Otherwise, not only do we remain victimized, but we just simply don't claim our power. We're just less empowered when we are not fully taking responsibility for ourselves. So, but we do it innocently. That's the point that I'm trying to say. Like it can really be naive. Like I just don't know how. Like I just don't know how to overcome this. I don't know how to access more power. I don't know like what else to do, because it can be really a childlike sort of association. Like I just don't have the maturity yet. I don't feel like the parent. I feel like the child. And it's only through life experience, it's only through more and more, cultivating awareness, that one sort of realizes through their own journey that, oh, right, I am capable. I totally could, take care of not only other people's problems, but I can take care of myself too. And all of that. So Very powerful. Any questions from either of you on this example? Persephone, 5th house, Libra, opposite the sun. And of course, there's more, obviously, right? We're just separating these parts here, and there's other dynamics going on. Like a Neptune square. It's pretty significant here to the Persephone. Overwhelm. Overwhelm is sort of the negative, or getting really pulled into a way higher mission, a way higher purpose, knowing that you are so divinely connected to a purpose, a mission, that you know, are guided, and that you are, you know, the story is bigger. Neptune is like, it's big and I'm going for it, but it's a square. So there can be doubt. You know, one day it's like the mission is big, I'm going for it, I have all the power. And the next day it's like, I'm not sure I can do this or what it is. Or yeah, you're smiling. Okay. Any comments about this one? Nope. Okay. So now we have Persephone at 28, Leo, same signature of the Leo, 5th house signature, and the 11th house with Mars. Not quite the opposition there. There is a square to Saturn. Okay. So again, the Leo stuff around, you know, needing to creatively actualize and potentially allowing that to be your victimization. And we can come up with a lot of reasons why we can't express ourselves, you know? And so you want to be careful of that, the continuously returning to the I want to so bad, but I can't because. So that would be like the abduction or the victimization. Something pulls you in of why you essentially stay the child or stay in the pain of it, not harnessing all that is there and rising into that you are this being who is absolutely creatively actualizing yourself and have this creative mission. You have a message. We've talked about this before with Mercury. There's a lot of power fueling your voice, your message, what you know, right? So this is all trying to come through. And it could be, which I've experienced before too, this Persephone energy can be like, I can't because my childhood was like this. If only I didn't spend 20 years under the influence of this trauma, I'd be so far along by now, which of course is a victim story. It doesn't mean that there's not truth in it, especially if there's a lot of abuse that happened, that there is truth in that, that it can, you know, prevent us from getting somewhere sooner. But at the same time, it's just knowing that we can use our stories. Well, I'm not so creatively expressed, or I'm not, you know, fully creating what I want because this happened to me, or this was the dynamic of the past. So the things that Persephone will always show us, the excuses we'll come up with to not be in our power. So that's how you want to read it in a chart too. That where are we getting abducted? Where are we getting victimized? Where are we allowing excuses of how we can't be the empowered self? We stay in the child, we stay in the immature, not being able to care for us, because Persephone shows that where you, this is an area where you, if you care for yourself in this area, it's just self-care in general, right? It's just take care of yourself. But in that area, if you really give the care there, then you will find your power. And so in this case, 5th house Leo for both of you, the more and more you're able to Leo, totally love yourself, adore yourself, appreciate yourself, acknowledge yourself, and then express yourself. And be the thing about Leo too, let's not forget, is that you need Leo wants to receive so badly, but we don't always allow ourselves to receive, right? So can you take the appreciation where it's coming, when it's coming? Can you accept it? And that's the thing we don't always do, especially in our partnerships. Like, they can tell us every single day that they love and adore us, but because we're focusing on some other negative, we don't even hear it. And then we're like still mad. Like, even though, and like some people are like, he never tells me he loves me, he never recognizes me, he never, and that's like, and meanwhile you're getting it, but there's other things happening, so you're not even letting it in. And that can be a Leo issue. It's never enough, right? But you're not telling me 10 times a day, or you're not appreciating every little thing. And it's just like the incessant need, or the Leo, often when we come in with strong Leo 5th house, it's because we lacked it. We were neglected of the love, of the attention, of the recognition, of, being treated like the queen or the king, right? It's like, so now we're really sort of hungry for it and might not even see it, recognize it, let it in, kind of thing. So that is the caution with this. 11th house, again, is I never fit in. I'm never understood. The victimization around unique self and accessing the unique self, or being alienated or ostracized, maybe from your family. They don't get me. And then that becomes the victim, or the like, I always feel like a child with my family. I can still deal with this with my own mother. It's like her sort of refusal or inability to see me where I am kind of puts me in a lower place over and over. And then sometimes I just like default to it because it's like easier in conversation. And then I'm feeling like, okay, I'm not really expressing all of myself here with you. And it's like, it can get intense. And so, yeah, it can show up in different ways in that way. So I do want to ask about, I realized that I forgot, and I do want to, out of this book here, Goddesses and Everyone. So just real quick, I'm just going to mention, so some of the other archetypes that are very, very strong are Artemis, which is like the hunter-gatherer woman. She's very independent and like ruthless. Like she's friends with animals. She lives in the forest, but she hunts them also, right? And there's more of this like independent quality about the Artemis character. So you might feel this in yourself, or you might just like totally know a woman who's like really in that. It's goal oriented and that sort of quality. And then we have Athena, Pallas Athena. So you can pull up the asteroids of Artemis or Athena or Pallas Athena. And Athena is the very like corporate businesswoman. Like, she's wearing suits. She's like totally living in the patriarchal world. She probably has a lot of like male friends also wearing suits, like just like really dominating that world. But she can also get really imbalanced from her femininity, from her sensuality, from her natural flow. And then there's the Hestia or Vesta, and they both represent like the hearth or the oven type of essence. And it's also like the Persephone, this emotional distance and lack of social persona, because literally the Hestia and Vesta are not a being. They are like an energetic, or like the hearth. They were like a symbol. And so that's the type of woman who's like, here in her book, she has the ability to enjoy solitude, to have a sense of spiritual meaning. So I have always related to that one too, being extremely introverted and just like really wanting to like make home and cozy little sacred space, and that like Hestia vibe. Yeah, and it's really beautiful, like that emotional distancing, like we can just see it in these archetypes when you can identify with them playing out. And then there's the Demeter and Ceres, who is the mother, usually extroverted, deep feelings, but the mother character can really carry the depression, the burnout, fostering dependency. And that's something I didn't mention, but that's a part of it with the Persephone signature, the like highly codependent relationships is part of the shadow. Maternal and generous, all of that with the mother. Hera and Juno are other symbols you can pull. Jealousy, vindictiveness, rage, inability to leave destructive relationships, lifetime commitment and fidelity. These are those wife symbols that come in. What she writes about Persephone, depression, manipulation, withdrawal into unreality. I really like that one. Ability to be receptive, to appreciate imagination and dreams, psychic abilities. And then we have Aphrodite, which is Venus. Very extroverted, serial relationships, promiscuity, difficulty considering consequences, right? Venus, Persephone is very pleasure drawn, the muse, like I'll do this now and I'll do him today and him another day kind of thing. It's very much Venus, Aphrodite is different than the other feminines because she's more independent and she loves relationship for the comparison, like, oh, I'm curious, all this diversity, all these different choices we have to experience. Loves relationship on that level. So the Venus, when we look at Venus in our charts, we can really see that it's not necessarily monogamous, right? But like Persephone is this more monogamous kind of energy, or the Hera or Juno energies. They're like bonding for life. But Venus is more about just like what we really want. And if someone meets that, then we might want to stay with them for life, but otherwise. So these are some of the main ones that are, and there's also Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George, and she is an astrologer. And so she wrote that fantastic book that's really well known out there in the astrology circle, Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George. And this is Jean Shinobu Bolin, The Goddesses in Every Woman, and she does The Goddesses in Every Man. And they are great. So, Sonia, did you have any comments or feedback around your Persephone in 12th house, Leo? It's also square the Saturn. I didn't mention much, but
It was just interesting to hear the reflection of kind of that flavor with the Leo archetype, because there's so much other Leo happening, and just to kind of hear that side of it. Definitely excuses to not express myself fully, or has been a theme for me. So it's helpful for me to keep that in mind.
yeah, the other thing can be I'll express myself if everyone in the audience absolutely loves me. Like, let me know you love me already.
Yeah, I relate to that. Or like I'll express myself at some point in the future when all these other things are like perfectly in line.
When I'm totally confident, which
Yeah,
never
like,
happened.
God.
I was listening to this woman the other day who's a singer, and she said she still has panic attacks before going on stage. And she's been a singer for 20 years. And it's just like so encouraging sometimes when I hear stories like that, like, because you think performers are they just don't have the fear.
They've got it. Yeah.
Yeah. But they overcome it. That's the thing. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, thank you, ladies. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is very powerful and meaningful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So next week, we'll do the chart interpretation. I'm not quite sure where we'll go with it since we did this today, but I'll think about it and we'll figure it out. Also, if either of you have any desires, I'm going to open that up for next week's class too. If there's anything particular that if you want, what we can do is we can either use your charts or your charts and some other charts. But if you want to bring your charts and whatever particular that you'd like to look into for the chart interpretation class, or you want to bring anyone else's class and some specific things that you'd like to look into, we can do that for next week's class.
Okay.
And maybe just let me know, message me if you do have a desire so I can prepare for that. All right. Take care.
Thank you so much.
See you soon. Bye.